now would be the turn of Zoe and Uli for them to explain how to prepare a successful proposal. I guess it's of interest to all the participants to this info day. So voilà, the floor will go to my colleagues Ulrich Nuscheler, Zoe Welders, who are senior project advisor in CINEA.
Thank you very
Zoe,
much,
Uli.
Sylvain. Indeed. So indeed, the purpose of our presentation is to give you a few tips on how to submit an excellent proposal. So we'll go through a few slides with a few things to remember if you go further in the presentation. The first element we'll look at is the process. So you're aware that last week the call was opened on the 18th of April, and we have a deadline on the 19th of September. So what is happening afterwards? So if we consider month 0, the date of the deadline, so 19th of September, well, first we'll go through an admissibility and eligibility check. And only those proposals that pass the admissibility and eligibility check will be sent to external experts who have been selected based on their skills, complementary expertise, their background, and of course, we thoroughly check that they don't have any conflicts of interest. So our proposals are assessed by minimum 3 external experts. Then they come up with rankings per funding per topic, and maximum 5 months after the call deadline. So this leads us to the month of February. At maximum, applicants will be notified on the outcome of their proposal. The successful ones, for which there will be budget, will be invited for grant agreement preparation, which then has to be signed maximum 9 months after the submission date. So this leads us to the month of June. So you can understand that a proposal submitted in September 24 is only very likely to start around September, because it's going to be after June 2025. So just bear in mind that your action, if positively evaluated, will not start right away. So where do we find information on how to submit a proposal? You can see on the next slide the print screen on the funding and tender portal. So in the previous presentation, you've received a hyperlink to the European funding and tender portal. And here you can find the live 2024 CET call online. Since last week, we have, as mentioned before, 15 open topics. So if you go further in the presentation, next slide, you will see a few print screens of what you can see on the funding and tender portal. You will find for each of the 15 topics a thorough topic description. It includes the objectives for each of the topics, the scope, and the expected impact we're looking for. Further below, you can find the topic conditions and documents. I strongly recommend you to read the call document, where you can find all of the 15 topic descriptions, also the budget involved for each topic, the timetable, the admissibility and eligibility criteria, financial and operational capacity elements, award criteria, and even more information. So please go through that document. On the next slide, you can see what else you can find on the funding and tender portal. So in the section call document, typically you'll find the call document, but also the application forms with the various parts of it. So we have a standard application form, a separate budget table, participant information, but I'll come back to that in a moment. And soon in that section, you will be able to find frequently asked questions for the topics that are open for funding. And of course, as well, the PowerPoint and recordings of today's info day. So give us a little time, but they will be uploaded very soon. And last but not least, on the next slide, you will also find a section of topic updates. And please have a look there as well, because typically just after the call deadline, you will see updates there on the number of proposals we've received per topic. And then once notification has taken place, you will also find information there on the call results. Another element to look at is the structure of the proposal. So you can find it here. So as I mentioned, it consists of a few parts. So the first one is part A, which you can access directly online. So it's administrative information you have to complete directly online for the entire consortium. And then you have what we call part B. Part B is a Word document that you will download from the funding and tender portal. You will complete it, and then you will have to upload it again as a PDF. So part B is the narrative technical part of your project idea. I'll give you a few tips about these in a moment, but what's important to note is that it's a document, it's a template to be respected. It contains instructions which you have to keep. So for reasons of equal treatment, you will understand that it's important that everybody keeps these instructions. There's also a font and some margin guidelines in there that you have to respect. If we come across proposals that don't respect the fonts or start playing with margins, this will have an impact on the admissibility of the proposal. Remember, only proposals that are admissible and eligible will be sent to external evaluators. So it would be a pity to be out of the evaluation process because of that. We also have a maximum number of pages to respect, which is 65 pages in our case. So if you intend to upload a longer document, well, it will be blocked and all the extra pages will not be visible to us and to the evaluators. Part C is the one on the key performance indicators. That's also directly to be completed online. You'll get more information on the KPIs from my colleague in a moment. The detailed budget table is also an important annex to upload as an Excel. So you'll provide detailed information there on the different types of costs you're foreseeing for the entire consortium. And the last compulsory annex is entitled participant information, where you can provide information on the staff, the previous actions, all the partners have been working on, etc. That document is not bound by a page limit. And just to be very clear, it's not a reason to put whatever you didn't manage to include in part B. So if you are working with pilot sites, or if you want to provide extra information on your key performance indicators and you didn't have sufficient space in the part B, the idea is clearly not that you put it in the participant information because it will be disregarded. It's not the place where to put it. You have to put all these elements in part B. We also have some optional annexes. For example, you can upload letters of support if you're working with pilot sites and you have commitments from the pilot owners, or if you have commitments, I don't know, from municipalities or so, you can put these letters of support in the optional annexes. Some topics as well have other requirements. I'm thinking about the PDA topic where you also have to upload investment table, but that's rather an exception. But for all the proposals, what you see here on the slide applies. I suggest we go a bit further into detail in part B and its structure, as it's quite key. So on the next slide, you will see the table of contents of part B. So this is the template you'll download from the funding and tender portal and the various sections you have to complete by keeping the instructions. I like to repeat it. So if you look at the structure, you will see that the first 4 headings are matching the award criteria. So it gives you a clear idea on where to complete what. So we're looking at the relevance, impact, implementation. The award criterion is called quality, but it's what is being assessed. And the last one is on resources. In the next slide, I would like to give some lessons learned from the past evaluation exercise we've had, and by going briefly through some of the headers. So as far as relevance is concerned, you will see when you read the topic description, what we're looking at, that sometimes you have various bullet points and that it clearly says, well, you can cover one or more of the bullet points, or at least one, and could be more. What we often see is that some proposals try to address a bit of everything, thinking that, well, we address a bit more, so we will have more points. Our recommendation here is be focused, be clear, and don't try to artificially and vaguely address too many aspects. If that's not what you intend to work on, don't try to address these. Explain clearly what the added value is of your proposal. Show that you know what already exists by explaining previous actions that have been organized in the field and explain how you're going to build on these outcomes. Don't just list a few projects you found in a project database, but show that you know what they've done and how your action is going to build on that. Show as well that you know the situation well. Have you done a proper gap analysis, and what is your proposal going to add to that? What's the added value? Prepare and clearly explain the starting point, and yeah, explain how you are going to address it. Make sure that your concept and methodology are clearly outlined. Sometimes we see that they're vaguely addressed, that they are not clearly explained. So make sure that you show what you want to do, the concept, and how you intend to address it. So the methodology, and make sure that your work plan is linked to that. Also, make sure that the proposed activities credibly lead to concrete achievements and impacts. On the next slide, I have put a few more lessons learned. On the work packages, make sure that they're clearly interrelated, provide a reasonable amount of deliverables and milestones. Deliverables and milestones are not the same. Sometimes we see that people put twice the same, but so they are different. Don't have too many either. Avoid redundancies in high-level descriptions. You need to have clearly detailed tasks. This we often see that the tasks have a nice title and then the description is a one-liner. It's not clear on what you intend to do. So clear tasks are key. So a tip here as well is make sure you spend quite some pages describing your tasks, rather than spending 10 pages on explaining the Green Deal. Of course, it's important that you show that you understand the policy context and how your proposal is addressing it, but don't just spend 10 pages explaining that you understand the entire policy context, but clearly explain what you want to do and how. Also, make sure that the engagement from your stakeholder is there, that it's clear, and that if you have good letters of support, make sure you include these. Your communication and dissemination plan is also important, and don't just submit a general one, but make it tailor-made for the stakeholders you intend to reach. Make sure the Gantt chart is also clear and realistic, and provide sufficient information in case you are working with pilots. Make sure you explain this properly, and as I mentioned before, you do so in Part B and not in the participant annex. A few elements on the admissibility and eligibility check that you'll see on the next slide. I'll be brief. So what is admissible is a proposal that's arrived on time and through the system, a proposal that is complete, that has respected the templates, kept the instructions, has kept the font, and is using the maximum page limit of 65 for Part B. What is eligible is a proposal submitted by a consortium respecting the consortium composition. So as mentioned by Annette, you will see that most of our topics require consortia consisting of at least 3 organizations from 3 different countries that are eligible. So it's important to respect that. The coordinator also needs to come from an eligible country. And we're looking for activities taking place within the live geographic location and that are in scope of the topics that you will have gone through in the call document. A few words on the award criteria on the next slide. I mentioned to you, we have 4. You can find them here again. They're all marked on 20 points. And you will see that impact is actually worth 150%. So will be converted into a mark out of 30. But so it's important that for each of the criteria, the proposal gets a mark of at least 10 out of 20. And then the sum of all these marks need to lead to at least 55 out of 90. Clearly, the proposals are ranked per topic in this case, and there is budget. The budget stops where, with whenever there's no budget anymore, basically we follow the ranking. And I mean, I just want to say that having just 55 is unlikely to be able to be funded. So if you are competing with proposals that have scores of 84, for example, clearly you will have to have a higher mark in order to come in the funding zone. So only the very, very best ones can be funded. What are we assessing? So relevance is looking at the objectives, the concept and the methodology of the proposal. Impact, you'll hear more in a moment from my colleague, but we're looking at ambition, credibility, sustainability and replication potential. The quality award criterion is mainly looking at the work plan and resources. It speaks for itself, looking at the project, team composition, the resources and the budget. I now hand over to my colleague who will give you some words on the impact.
Thank you, Zoe. We just have to get the logistics here done. Hello. So I try to be brief. Maybe next slide, directly diving into it. So, I mean, you have heard from Zoe already that we give a special weight to impact. So one of the most challenging elements of the proposal writing is certainly the part on the impacts and the indicators. And as Zoe said, it's really the section also that receives most attention from the evaluators, because that is the part where you express the difference of your project. And of course, for us also very relevant, because in an aggregated form, that is the element that expresses the difference that our program makes. So to that end, we have established so-called expected impacts for each of the topics, and your proposal should establish very well how your activity contributes to those expected impacts. And as you see on the slide, we distinguish 3 levels of indicators. I would like to start with the topic specific in the middle, highlighted in yellow. Then we have the activity, or also called project specific indicators. And then we have the common indicators of the LiveSet subprogram. Next slide, please. So we zoom now into these 3 levels of indicators. Again, I start with the topic-specific indicators. Why? Because they're really central. You find them established under each of the topics. And depending on the breadth of the topic scope, they might be all relevant for your proposed activity or only partly. So you don't necessarily have to address them all, but please decide on a case-by-case basis which ones are relevant. Maybe I shouldn't say so, but I think it's quite true that of all the indicators, these are probably the most important ones. So please spend enough effort on those. Then in addition, we have the so-called project-specific or activity-specific indicators, and you're encouraged to define those, meaning that would be indicators that are really tailored to your specific activity on top of the topic-specific indicators, because that's your chance to capture impacts that would not be expressed in the topic-specific indicators. It's not mandatory, it's more see it as a chance. Then thirdly, there are the common program indicators. And these are the primary energy savings, final energy savings, renewable generation, greenhouse gas reduction, and investments into sustainable energy. You find them under each topic, and they correspond also to the LiveSet KPIs that I will just address in a second. To the LiveSet KPIs 1 to 5, I have to be precise. So these 5 common indicators, they are part of the 11 LiveSet subprogram indicators that form part of the part C of the application form. Zoe mentioned them already. And these common indicators might be, pay attention to that, fully or partly covered by the topic specific. So in that case, you don't need to address them 2 times. And you should address them as appropriate. So for example, a pure energy efficiency project would maybe not necessarily generate renewable energy impacts, and the other way around. Still, a priori, we would expect you to address these 5 common indicators. But just to say again, the topic specific are even a bit more central. Next slide. For all the 3 type of indicators, the following applies. The impacts that you present in your proposal need to be credible. That's really the alpha and omega. Proposals need to present the starting point and the underlying assumptions, and that includes also the baselines and benchmarks. And you need to make sure that you establish clear links between the activities you propose and the results. So it doesn't make sense that you say we produce so and so many renewables, and in the end, you cannot link it to the proposed activity. So it should not be just an imaginary thing, not clearly linked. The second thing is that we ask you to establish and quantify the results and impacts for the duration of the project, but also for 5 years after the project end. And since we have seen that this has been misunderstood both at the application phase, but also later for the KPI exercise, just let me take 1 minute to explain what we mean. For the project end date category, you would provide all those impacts that will be directly achieved by the project activity and within the project duration, but also, and this is important, and this is often mistaken, impacts directly triggered within the project duration, but with the impacts only accruing after the project end. Still, you would encode it there under the project end because they're triggered by the project within the project duration. But also impacts indirectly triggered and encouraged and replicated outside the immediate scope of the project, but triggered within the project duration. You would still report, or not report, but capture these impacts under the project end value. And for the beyond 5 years value, you would only put those impacts that are really triggered and replicated outside, so after the project has ended. Next slide, please. That's already, no, it's not my final, it's the final impacts. So just 2 more remarks on the KPIs that we mentioned. So you also asked to fill in the part C, which, as I said, consists of the 11 common life set indicators. You should address more or less all of the KPIs 1 to 5, and for the rest 6 to 11, please see which are relevant and fill them out. Important is that the part C should not be in contradiction to the part C, but B, but so they should be complementary or in line. This is relevant now, but it gets more relevant when your proposal is selected, because then you will be asked to report your impacts in a so-called KPI tool at a later stage at ninth month, and we would also look at those KPIs during the GAP preparation. This was it for the impacts, and then now we have still, next slide, quite some tips, but we are not going to present them because we don't have the time. So if we can just run through the headings. Next slide. So one would be, please start early, start now. Next slide. Read the relevant information. Next slide. Choose your idea, structure it well, and stick to it. That's also very much in line with the lessons learned that Zoe presented. Next slide. Build a good consortium, super important. I mean, this is something one immediately looks at, whether you have a credible consortium. Next slide. Create a budget bottom up, so not imaginary, but nicely bottom up. It's always very convincing. Next slide. Try to create a thread. Also what Zoe says, have an idea, tell it where it comes from and where it goes to. Next slide. And plan enough time for the final polishing. And I already hand over again.
So a few final words from our side on where to look for information. So here you can find a few links of databases and portals on where to look for information. Given the time constraints we have, I won't go through these in detail. Then on the next slide, we just would like to highlight as well that there are people out there to help you. So you all have what we call an NCP, a national contact point for the live program. So have a look on our website and you can find who they are and get in touch with them. And so they can give you some tips, guidance on how to draft your proposal. And last, but certainly not least, if you aren't convinced to submit a proposal this year under the 2024 CET call, on the next slide, you will see that it's worth staying on the funding and tender portal because there's another header there that might be of use and relevance to you. Work as an expert. So it gives you a link to our expert database. And here we strongly encourage you to upload your CV, your experience, might be very valuable for us, and you could be contracted as an independent expert and help us with the evaluation exercise. I think this is it for us. Thank you very much for your attention, and above all, good luck from our side with the drafting of your proposal. Thank you.